Let's talk now to former Chief Constable of Durham Police, Mike Barton. Mike, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, look, how long have you been in the constabulary?
Well, I'm now retired, of course, but I did serve 40 years in the police.
40 years. So you've had your fair share of kind of witnessing disturbances, riots even. What is different this time around? How big a role is social media playing?
Oh, massive, massive. I mean, when you see the coordinated way that there were potentially 100 demonstrations across the country where I never had to face that. I mean, the police force now is facing an unprecedented threat when you think of the dispersed resources. So there are only so many police officers in the country, and when I was facing this sort of disturbance, we kind of knew that there were 4 or 5 hotspots and you could actually put your resources there. A bird of a different feather now.
So in terms of resources, how did it work yesterday?
When there
were
happened,
like 100 predicted.
What happened was the great British public showed themselves that policing isn't about the police. Good order in society isn't about imposing it with an iron fist and a jackboot. It's about the community saying, we want to live peacefully and we're going to do something about it. And I thought it was inspirational overnight, looking at what happened. But what the police were going to do was to put their resources in places where they could respond quickly, but it was less than optimal.
Interested, Mike, in you as a former police officer saying you're inspired by people coming out onto the streets in those demonstrations last night, many thousands. But the official police advice to people was precisely don't do that. Now, I mean, you are a civilian now and you're free to say what you think, but people you would know well, presumably from your former career, were telling ordinary people to stay at home, don't go on the streets. And yet you're saying that was... Are you saying that was the right thing to do?
Well, it clearly was, because let's look at what happened.
Why did your colleagues then, who are current officers, why is there a difference between what you're saying? If you were a police officer, you would have been sitting here the day before advising people to stay at home.
I mean, I've got a bit of the benefit of hindsight, haven't I, Charlie, because it's all turned out for the best last night. However, that would still have been what my advice. So when you deal with violence against... So, for example, a slightly different issue, but violence against women in the nighttime economy, the best way that we can actually counter that is for the streets to be busy, for people to be on the street and for there to be other people around. People are attacked when there are few people on the street. So I can understand why the police were giving this advice, because they didn't want there to be a meeting of opposing factions. Understood. And we saw that in Aldershot.
Understood.
So, for me, my advice to the public would be, if you've got a community and you care for it, then use the streets, use the buses, use local shops, because the people who didn't appear last night, the thugs and the criminals and the people who want to destroy society, they weren't there because they felt intimidated by decent people.
Can I ask one more thought, which is that the way that the policing worked or didn't work earlier on, not last night, because quite rightly people are relieved that things didn't happen last night. But what about policing earlier on? Do you think from the outside looking in that to any degree the police were caught out by the scale of what happened and the speed of what happened?
Well, I think we all were.
And why was that?
Well, because social media whipped it up into a flame. And there were as many police officers on duty last night as there were earlier. You don't have to define the success of policing by how many police officers are having to cop a brick on their head.
I thought there were 6,000 extra officers who were ready to be deployed last night.
There may have been, but all the way through the last few days, there have been thousands of extra police officers on duty. My point is, there were as many police officers on duty last night, but you didn't see them. It's like this show here. from the outside, there's 2 people here, but there aren't. There are scores of people here, and it's exactly the same in policing. There will have been tens of thousands of police officers in the background, and generally, when I policed riots and disturbances like this, it was 90% boredom and waiting around and kicking your heels, and then 10% of being really frightened and fielding bricks. You don't have to define whether the police were there by how many police officers are injured. I think last night was a raging success because the police and the public worked together.
Mike Barton, thank you very much. Former Chief Constable of Durham Police, thanks very much for your time.